recognize that you're not that special. You're not the only one that's struggling with their relationship with food. You're not the only one that hates their body. We're all going through it, and you're not alone. That's really what I want to bring you to here.
Damn, let's talk some shit.
It's Polly Siegel
And Victoria Aaron.
two licensed therapists who've spent way too much money on degrees, certifications, and trainings. We both love what we do and couldn't imagine working in any other profession. But we're forced to be serious all the time, and that gets boring. Shit Talking Shrinks discusses important mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while poking fun along the way. It won't be all fun and games because after every episode, you'll walk away with tangible tools to navigate life more effectively.
We love a tangible tool.
Welcome, Michelle. I am so happy to have you here, part of this episode. One, because I'm a really big fan of your work and everything that you do on Instagram. And it's also wonderful to be able to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We have to give Victoria shit because she is not joining us for this episode today.
Yeah, I'm offended. I don't know Victoria, but I'm offended.
You should be. She has decided that she needs to go visit a new man in her life. She is traveling to meet him and hang with him. And so that was more important than talking about intuitive eating. So there's that.
So rude. I got stood up so she could go find love. I mean, no, honestly, good for her though.
I know, right? We're like rooting for her. We want all the love and magic for Victoria.
Oh, totally. All the good vibes. Let's go, Victoria.
So today we're going to be talking about intuitive eating and why we all need to ditch diet culture because it is harmful and toxic and has hurt every single, I would say, person on this planet, but really specifically women. We've really been hit the hardest. But before we get into all of that, introduce yourself. I couldn't even remember half the things that you've achieved and accomplished. So that's why you're introducing yourself.
Yes. So I'm a registered dietitian. My name's Michelle, by the way. You can call me Michelle. And I'm a registered dietitian. So I got my bachelor's in nutrition and dietetics and went on to get registered. And then I got my master's in health psychology after that, because for me personally, I really love the blend between food and psychology. I think that's kind of where all the magic happens. So that was something for me that I really wanted to learn more about. And then I'm also a licensed medical nutrition therapist. And so basically, what my day to day looks like and who I help is I love helping women just create a stress free relationship with food because, like you said, diet culture has touched all of us in some way, and some of us more than others, and really caused us to feel like food is the worst and our bodies suck and we just have to micromanage everything, right? And so I help women come away from that all or nothing mentality and learn how to nourish their bodies in a really stress-free way that doesn't involve the counting or the tracking or the restriction or the over exercising or the obsessing. Like, at the end of the day, I just want to help women live their life and take care of their health too, obviously. So there's a way to do both of those. And I think, unfortunately, we don't always know how to do that. So that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, absolutely. And thankfully there's more people in your field that are coming out that are encouraging women to pull away from diet culture and to disown those scripts because we know how harmful it is, which I think is a nice segue into what is diet culture and why does it fucking suck?
Diet culture it's basically just this whole concept of, and I'm going to talk about women because that's specifically who I work with and they're the ones that are targeted the most. I'm not saying that to say that women are the only ones affected though, but that's what I'm going to talk about. So typically women are told by our society, by our culture, that skinny is beautiful. Skinny is worthy. Skinny is attractive. You won't be loved or valued unless you look a specific way. And so, as a result of that, we have to do all these ridiculous dietary methods to control our weight and fix our bodies, which is really sad. And that's why it sucks, is because we're told as women that we're a problem that needs to be fixed, right? Like our own natural genetics, our own looks is a problem. And it's just creating so much anxiety in our culture, so much discontentment and obsession over our weight and food. And it's seriously disrupting our quality of life and also our health, too. It's not even, I think that diet culture lives under this guise of it's for our health, right? Like losing weight is always good for our health and all of this and restricting food and limiting calories or carbs. But actually, there's plenty of literature to show that that type of living is not healthy at all.
Yeah, and quite frankly, we have so much research on diet culture and it doesn't work. Like we've all been buying into a system that has no evidence to say it has sustainability. That's mind-blowing to me that we like are these robots in this when you look at the evidence and it's like there's no sustainability, it doesn't work, it leads to eating disordered behaviors, it creates shame and guilt and a plethora of mental health complications, let alone physical health complications because you're messing with your metabolism. I mean, I could really rant about the whole thing, but I just find that aspect to be so wild about it is why do we continue to buy into a social script that causes havoc for our mind, body, and spirit? And then the industry itself is making millions off of us as these vulnerable creatures.
Billions. And yeah, and I think diet culture is so sneaky because, you mentioned there's no evidence. It's like some people would say there is evidence, right? And that's how diet culture is really sneaky, is that there are technically studies out there, research out there that might say that, oh, calorie restriction is an effective means of weight loss. But then once you actually read the study, though, that's why it's so important that when you're talking to somebody about your health and wellness, you talk to somebody who knows how to interpret research. They're not just reading the headlines, right? Because when you actually look into these studies, there's not quality evidence. There might be evidence, but it's not quality evidence. And so we can't sit there and say that diets work because a lot of times the studies don't go past 2 years and they're not controlling for a lot of factors like disordered eating and body image issues. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, if somebody loses weight, but they develop disordered eating and severe body image issues in the midst of that, then the diet didn't work. Right. And so it's frustrating because there's plenty of people that will say, well, diets do work, but have you really like looked into what these studies are saying and what they're, beyond the news headlines?
Well, I guess it's how you define quote working. To me, something that works is there's sustainability for years and years and years to come. Okay, keto might quote work because you lose a bunch of weight very quickly. But after you start to recalibrate to normal life again and being a real human, it doesn't work because you end up gaining the weight back plus more. So I think that for me, I'm just speaking humbly as well. I don't think something works unless you can sustain it to the end of time.
I completely agree. And I think that's a lot of times I'm just sitting here like, yo, have you guys just thought logically about this for a second? Like before you do the keto diet, think with your brain, do I want to not be able to eat bread 20 years from now? Right? Or like, or feel stressed out when there's cake on my birthday. And that's how all these diets are, is you get so excited because we're so like our self-esteem is so down in the dumps and just complete it's like someone threw our self-esteem into a dumpster and lit it on fire. That's how much diet culture has gotten to us women. And so of course when we're told that something is going to help us feel better about ourselves, we don't think logically. We don't think about the long term and what 20 years from now what that means for us. And that's the issue is we need to we need to zoom out and think about, does this actually make sense though? Does it actually make sense to never have carbs again, or to never eat after 7 p.m., or to constantly be counting points and calories for the rest of my life? That makes no sense.
I think what you just said is so powerful because as a victim of diet culture, and I can kind of do some self-disclosure here, I would convince myself it is totally sustainable. Like when you ask that question, do you want to eat bread in 20 years? Like my brain when it was stuck in that like world would be like, yeah, yeah, I could do that. Sure.
Yeah, if it means I'll be happy, sure. Yeah, that's a small sacrifice.
You're right. Like it was like completely distorted when now, being healed from diet culture and doing a lot of my own work in the intuitive eating world as a clinician, but also as just an ordinary human, it would never work. And I was so foolish to think otherwise. But, and I say that with kindness, obviously, because I know a lot of people are still trapped in diet culture. And I have an abundance of empathy for what it feels like to be looking at the world through that lens. I remember there was a saying growing up, and I feel like I'm going to butcher it, but it's like, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels.
That's exactly the saying. You got it. Yep.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember hearing that and being like, yeah, that's totally true.
Yeah, I remember that too.
And now I'm like, oh my God, that is the most sick thing anyone could ever say to a teenage girl.
Absolutely. I think it was Twiggy, the model, that said that.
Yeah, well, Twiggy fucked us all with her 90s Anno look.
Right. Yeah, she was a big reason that we all struggle.
So, I think with all that said, and let's like forget, I don't want to say forget about the evidence and the research because I'm a research gal at heart, but let's segue into really the mental health issues that come along with diet culture. For me, in my own personal journey, it led to a lot of guilt and shame and embarrassment and obsessions and perseveration around food. I mean, the rigidity that I would have, the intense fear that would come up of, oh my God, I had a bite of cake. How many calories was that? Do I now need to, not eat blank because I ate that? I mean, it was this constant hamster wheel in my brain where I like couldn't get out of it. And I struggled with an eating disorder for 8 years because of a lot of different reasons, but diet culture being a big culprit to that outcome. But I just think, it completely it puts you into a hell state. Like you're trapped in hell when you're in diet culture mentality. That's my experience at least. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I experience the same. And when I have clients come to me, they're saying the same things, that they just want freedom from the way that they're feeling and peace, and that they're at war with their body. They're at war with food. It's like they wake up and the first thing they think about is food. They're not even done eating breakfast and they're already thinking about what's for lunch. And it creates such an obsessive state about trying to control all these things. And what it does is it takes up so much mental real estate. It's like 95% of your brain is sold out to thoughts of food and your body. And so you've only got that 5% left to focus on what really matters, like your career and your family and your friends and being a good person. Like you've only got 5% capacity, or 10%, whatever you feel like it is for you. But for me, I felt like it was probably about 10% capacity for everything else besides food. And it's one of those things, kind of like what you were touching on before, that in the midst of it, you don't recognize how much it's robbing you of joy and happiness because you're just so hyper focused on it and hyper focused on this goal that I will be happy if I get skinny enough. And so you lie to yourself over and over again and convince yourself that it's normal and healthy and good. But in the meantime, your life is literally just passing you by because you're too obsessed with food and how you look. That was my experience, at least.
I mean, I think you're speaking to millions of women and their experience. Like, I can't tell you how many different experiences and events and celebrations that I absolutely missed out on because I was so preoccupied with what food was going to be there. Can I eat it? How many calories? What will happen? Oh, I don't want to feel anxious, so maybe I should avoid the party altogether so that I'm not tempted to eat. I mean, Super Bowl parties. I have a distinct memory of being in high school and not going to a Super Bowl party because I knew there'd be a bunch of snacks. And I just couldn't put myself in temptation. Like, it was like, oh, I the agony, the pure agony. I mean, when I would say the eating disordered behavior for me started at 13, and I dropped a tremendous amount of weight and got tons of praise from my family, from friends, society at large. Men, like, teenage boys became more interested. And it's the sick part about it is that we get so much validation from society for being thin or losing weight. And so to have that instant gratification, that dopamine dump that you get from an objective that is leading to so much emotional turmoil, but yet you still get to feel those neurotransmitters. And so I think that's a piece to kind of recognize too, is it's hard to break something where you get celebrated.
Yeah, that's the sneakiness of diet culture, and the issue of diet culture is that it's teaching everybody to do that. It's teaching everybody to care about weight loss and to see that as, oh, you're so disciplined, or I wish I was like you. I wish I could resist desserts like you. And, tell me what you're doing to lose the weight. That's just like ingrained in us. I still catch myself sometimes being tempted to say that because it's automatic and it's a part of our society. And then I have to be like, what the hell, Michelle? Like, no, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to comment on someone's weight, because I've been on the receiving end of that. And I resonate with your story a lot. I, in high school as well, started to lose weight through excessive dieting and disordered eating behaviors. And I already had a small frame. I mean, I'm 5'1" at the time. I was probably not even 5 foot. And I was a normal weight according to BMI. And so I didn't really have a lot of weight to lose. But I was body dysmorphic. So in my mind, I had all of this weight to lose. And if you look up the ideal body weight for someone that's my size, it's like 95 pounds based on these ridiculous calculations.
Oh my God.
That's the low end of it, which of course in my brain was like, that's my goal if that's what it is. So
Right, but can I interject here? BMI is complete bullshit. BMI was what, created by an astrologist? Is that right?
it was a sociologist and I think astronomer. Yeah, he was not a medical professional, and he himself did not intend for it to be a measure of health, more so just a screening tool, which you could say it's a helpful screening tool, maybe 2% of the overall picture, right? And the problem is that BMI has become, I mean, I have my own podcast on this, but BMI has become a measure of health, right? Like, you get landed in a category, that's your diagnosis on your sheet from the doctor's office. That's what they're coding insurance for, or billing insurance for, is your BMI. And so it's ridiculous. But anyway, so for me, I lost a little bit of weight and was praised for it. And it was just affirmation, like, Michelle, you're doing so good. I wish that I looked like you, blah, blah, blah. I had one friend, only one, express the tiniest bit of concern to me. And it really stuck with me. I still think about that. And I think about, she can go about it the best way. She was like, I wouldn't lose any more weight if I were you. I was like, all right.
So it was still done in a shaming way. I mean, you can't fucking win. Either you're too big or you're too small.
I know, and it was still like a underhanded praise as well, right? Like, I wouldn't lose any more. You're good now, but don't do anymore. But at least it was some sort of like the other side, right? The other end of the coin or side of the coin where it was like, oh, maybe what I'm doing shouldn't continue, I guess. So I appreciate her. I think, not the best delivery, but it was still helpful in a weird way.
Okay, so we've obviously made it clear to our listeners diet culture is something that we need to abandon. So intuitive eating, right? Like to me that's the solution. That's the way to heal and transform and change your relationship with food in a way where it's beautiful and joyous and yummy. Right? Like we don't need to view, and I say yummy like pun intended, but like I mean emotionally yummy, where you can eat what you want to eat and there's no guilt and there's no shame and there's zero embarrassment. It's that you actually fully get to experience food in a celebratory way where it doesn't create such a haunting effect. So I know I'm putting you on the spot, but can you define what is intuitive eating for anyone who doesn't know this concept?
Yeah, so I'll give you their specific definition. This was a concept created by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right, but they're the dietitians who coined this whole framework and everything. And so the way that they define it is that intuitive eating is a self-care eating framework which integrates instinct, emotion, and rational thought. So basically, to me, what intuitive eating is it's ditching all of the external things around us that we're told is supposed to tell us how to eat. We're ditching the clock from telling us how to eat, or the calorie, or the calculator, I guess, or what the nutrition label says, or what an Instagram influencer says to eat. We're ditching all of that, and we're relying on what's internal instead, and we're looking inward to, how does my body actually feel, though, right? Like, what would nourish me right now, what would feel good right now? And emotions are a part of that too. It's not just giving myself vegetables all the time because that makes me feel good. It's also, well, you know what, it's my birthday, so I'm going to have some cake because I'm going to live my life, but I'm going to do that in a way that honors my body as well. Like, it's hard to define, right? But it's a holistic way of eating that allows you to be physically healthy and also mentally healthy.
Right. And it prioritizes the mental health as it thinks about, relationship with food, which diet culture doesn't give a shit about your mental health. Like diets don't at all assess mental health in the process, whereas intuitive eating is an opportunity to be monitoring physical, but also mental, emotional, and cognitive health. As I understand intuitive eating and my journey in it, is it's really allowing your body to guide choices and not the scripts or the rules or the rigidity that society tells us when it comes to food, but more of like, what does your body need? And a question that I will ask myself often, I'll be curious your thoughts on this, Michelle, is like, what what am I hoping for my body to feel after I eat this food?
Yeah, I love that.
So sometimes that's I want to feel heavy and cuddly and just like yummy. And that might be like a hearty stew. Or I ask myself, what do I want my body to feel after I consume this? I want to feel light and energized and airy. Okay, well, then that might be a different choice. But it's not making a choice based on calories or macros or any of that shit. It's more of like, what do I want to experience in my body as I interact with this food? And that is very dependent on my mood. That's dependent on how I feel in that moment, what's going on externally in my environment. There have been so many times where I've made a conscious choice around food that was wonderful, but would diet culture approve of it? Absolutely not. Because that day I needed pizza and I needed burgers and I needed, my brownie afterwards. And that's exactly what my body needed that day.
Yeah. And you probably felt great after, right?
I felt wonderful. But then there's days where like a salad is what my body really needs. So it's like moving away from right, wrong, good, bad, healthy, unhealthy. Like all of that doesn't matter in intuitive eating. That's my conceptualization, but correct me if I'm off base.
No, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And I think, for anybody who's like me and that really appreciates seeing things from a logical lens, I think intuitive eating, it can seem kind of like, woo, like, whoa, that's like intuition that's uncomfortable for me. Like, that's a little too spiritual for me or something. I don't know. But for me, it's actually quite logical because we're getting back to how we were at our most pure form, I guess, without the influence of culture and society. We're born with the ability to regulate our appetite and to eat when we're hungry and stop when we're full and fulfill our needs. There's so much research on child feeding patterns and when they are given free reign of food without parents telling them how much to eat or to finish their vegetables before they can have brownies or whatever it is, they, over the course of like a week or so, they will eat exactly the right balance of nutrients that their body needs for adequate growth and development. And so, without anybody telling them, they just know it's innate. And that's what we unlearn as we grow up in this culture. And as women, we're told that we need to diet and we need to be skinny and everything, is we learn not to trust our bodies. We learn that our bodies are trying to sabotage us all the time. And there's obviously nuances that, like, you have to learn what truly is my body's request and what's not. But in general, if you can just like go back to brass tacks of the instincts you were born with, you're going to be fine. You're going to take care of your health. At the end of the day, your body's instincts are designed to keep you alive and to thrive, right? And so there's just relearning how to trust yourself with food and trust that your body knows what it's doing. And that's the logical piece that I love, is that it makes sense because that's how we were born. And that's how, if you want to go back to caveman days, that's how they lived. And clearly they lived because now we're alive and they continue to carry on civilization. So if they were able to do it without the apps on their phones and the diet magazines and the Jenny Craig programs, then clearly they didn't need all of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So here's a question that I get often, with my clients in my clinical practice, because I'm talking about intuitive eating a lot. But if you give me permission to eat whatever I want, and if you give me permission where there's no food rules, then I'm going to go crazy. And all I'm going to eat are Cheetos and pizza and mac and cheese and burgers. Like if you give me that sense of liberation, I'm going to go fucking nuts. How would you best respond to that fear?
Try it out. See what happens. See how you feel within a week.
By giving yourself permission, see how it goes.
Just try it out. Yeah. Because I hear this too all the time, right? Like, oh, but I need to follow a plan because otherwise I'll just eat ice cream all day, every day. And it's like, think about it. If you were literally to wake up and eat ice cream for breakfast and then ice cream for lunch and then ice cream for dinner, do you really think you would still want ice cream the next day? Probably not. I think you'd probably be sick of ice cream. and and so intuitive eaters, that's a big misconception, is that, well, I'm just going to eat junk food all day long, which I don't even like that phrase, but that's what the people say, so I'm going to say it. and that's not true. Like, they're intuitive eaters have a healthy relationship with all foods. So that means a healthy relationship with the quote unquote junk foods, so we know how to regulate them. We also have a healthy relationship with the foods like the vegetables of the world and the whole grains and the beans. And research is showing that the diet quality of intuitive eaters is awesome. So, yeah, I mean, it's back to your original question. I don't know that anybody would actually take my advice if I were like, go try it. But that's legitimately my response, is go try it and report back in a week. Let me know how you're feeling. And let me know if you don't feel like having a salad after that, you know? And then we can talk about how to navigate intuitive eating and navigate the honeymoon effect, because that honeymoon effect is pretty common when we've lived for a lot of us decades in restriction mode. That the unconditional permission to eat what you want, when you start to do that, it's really common to see, okay, now I'm just going to go get all the foods that I used to not eat and I'm going to go crazy. And so I call that the honeymoon effect. And that's a normal part of the process, but it can be navigated and limited, I guess, because again, it's probably not going to make you feel very good. So let's try and do that intelligently. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So we as shit talker shrinks love our tangible tools. So if someone leaves this episode and they're like, I want to try this thing called intuitive eating, how would they start? If you could give us your top 3 tips on how you would begin to explore this new world. And I'm going to push you to make them concise, like heavy hitters.
Okay. Throw out your scale. It is not helping you. Having a scale that you step on every morning it's not helping you when you're letting it define your mood for the day, define what you're going to eat that day. It is taking you further and further away from learning intuitive eating, because now you're looking at an external number and letting it dictate how you should behave after that. So throw it out. That's number 1. Number 2 is start to ask yourself, how will this make my body feel? I actually started to have my husband ask that like a year or 2 into our marriage. And he kind of says it like tongue in cheek all the time. Like, how is this going to make my body feel? But I actually have noticed him be able to regulate his appetite better and regulate like having a balanced diet better, because he's just asking himself that simple question of, how is this going to make me feel? And the third thing is, man, there's so many to choose from. What do I pick? It's the last one, so there's like extra pressure on it.
Well, here's the beauty is anyone who likes this can reach out to you and seek out your services to get all the other juicy tips.
I got 1,000 more.
This is just a teaser. This is just the tip, you know?
It's true. So throw out the scale, ask yourself, how is this going to make my body feel? And I think recognize, this is going to sound bad, maybe. So I apologize if this doesn't land well on you, listener, but recognize that you're not that special. You're not the only one that's struggling with their relationship with food. You're not the only one that hates their body. We're all going through it, and you're not alone. That's really what I want to bring you to here, is there is common humanity here. We can bond together knowing that this sucks. We're all taught that there's good food and bad food, and skinny is healthier. And if we are in a specific BMI category, we're the worst human in all the planet. But you're not that special. You're not the only one that feels that way, and you're not the only one going through this. And there's freedom for you in knowing that. It's not that I want you to feel worse about yourself. It's that I actually want you to feel freedom in that, because I know this is an isolating thing to go through, right? Like for me, I didn't talk about this at all when I was going through it. And it was after the fact, and I started to open up about my story, that people were like, oh, I'm like, yeah, because I didn't want to talk about that shit. Like, it sucks and it's dirty. And no woman wants to admit that she struggles with her body image, right? Because that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be hot. And so you're not that special.
You're not that special. You're not the unique snowflake that all millennials were told they were in the 80s and the 90s.
And there's so many ways that we could apply that logic. Like, you're not unique in the fact that your body is uniquely broken or your brain is uniquely broken, and that's why you can't follow the diet, right? Like, no, that's not special to you. I hate to break it to you. Everybody goes through that. And so I hope that there's freedom in that reality.
And then bonus, I'm going to throw in some intuitive eating tips that I like to share with clinicians.
Yes, let's hear it.
So now we're going to walk away with 5 tools. You're welcome, everyone. So for me, it's also about having a regulated nervous system before you walk into food, because food has always previously been triggering. And when we're triggered, our amygdala is heightened and our adrenaline is pumping, and we're not in our window of tolerance. And so, what I would tell clients is, you know, because of your anxious relationship with food, or because food is all consuming, like before you touch any food, I want you to do 5 square breaths. I want you to inhale through the nose, hold that breath, count of 7, exhale for a count of 8. Do it 5 times before you put any food in your mouth. And that's not because you're trying to hold back or restrict. It's just get your body into a feel good, safe space as you consume food, because then that rewires your relationship with food inherently. Like if your brain is in fight or flight, it's going to always associate food as dangerous. So it's also like this neurochemistry of like, you need to be in a safe zone, like internally as you consume. So that's tip number 4. And tip number 5 is use your 5 senses to enjoy food. Like, what does your food smell like? What does it taste like? What does it sound like? What does it look like? That's what makes an experience beautiful and enjoyable, is when we use our biological 5 senses that have served us for 500,000 years. And instead of just scarfing it and trying to get through the food experience as quickly as possible, it's like slowing down and being like, wait a second, this food is beautiful. Like I was eating pistachio nuts the other day. Have you ever stared at a pistachio nut? Like it is gorgeous. No, seriously, like go look at it. It has yellows and greens and purples and browns, and they dance together on the nut. That was so weird.
Yeah, I love it. You're like Ratatouille right now, like talking about the beauty of the cheese and the grapes. Have you seen that movie?
Yes, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so promise me, Michelle, you'll stare at a pistachio nut, because I swear it's more gorgeous than you've ever imagined it. But use your 5 senses, and it also changes the experience. Okay, well I could talk to you for so much longer, but we're at our time. Thank you so much for your insight, your expertise, your knowledge, your guidance. I truly believe anyone who listened to this and who has the courage to give intuitive eating a go, their life is going to be radically different. We know that, but we hope that our listeners will try it on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's such an honor. And I obviously love talking about this. So, also, therapists are kind of my favorite type of humans. So, I love being able to connect with you.
We're an interesting breed, that's for sure. All right. Well, Victoria would normally say big love. Hopefully she's getting laid at this moment.
She's getting a lot of big love right now.
Hopefully she's getting a lot of big love, and we'll catch you guys later.